429. The, quote, omnipotence of criticism. Chalcedon Report number 164, April 1979. One of the fundamental beliefs of the Enlightenment was in what Peter Gay termed the omnipotence of criticism. Few doctrines have been more influential in the modern mind. We are all, to some degree, infected by it. Belief in the omnipotence of criticism means a belief in the power of criticism, the critical word. It means that the solution to problems is seen as a judgment or a law. This belief rests on original sin, man's belief that he can be and is his own God, able to determine and create good and evil for himself. Genesis chapter 3 verse 5, compare Isaiah chapter 45 verse 7. God's word is omnipotent. He says the word and creation appears. He passes the word of judgment, and heaven and earth pass away. His word declares. God's word is law. When he says, "Thou shalt not steal," all theft is judged with an eternal judgment. Hell is a witness to the omnipotence of God's critical word. With the Enlightenment and with existentialism today, man's belief in the omnipotence of criticism has developed rapidly. The impotence of the modern intellectual and of its community, the college, university, and seminary, is due to his illusion that his criticism is potentially or actually omnipotent. The, quote, solution, end quote, to problems is thus critical analysis. Perhaps no other Chalcedon report has stirred more hostility than number 138, wherein I discussed critical analysis. The anger of many academicians was intense. This belief in the omnipotence of criticism has led to an age of judgmental churchmen, whose solution to problems is not Christian reconstruction, but critical analysis. Politics has been the art of criticism by lawmaking. Hearings are held, legislation framed and passed, embodying a series of judgments, and the problem is supposedly on its way to solution. After one major piece of restrictive legislation was passed several years ago, a legislator, interviewed briefly on television, declared that a major step had been taken towards solving a serious problem. The problem has not been solved. It has become more pressing since then, because man's fiat word has no creative power. Man's criticisms, his laws, have no omnipotence. Instead of producing or bringing forth something new and better, they inhibit, alienate, or destroy. The growing curse of the modern world is the belief that criticism and fiat legislation can be creative and productive. Criticism and judgment are replacing thought and work as the supposed means of productivity. God's word and judgments are creative and productive because he is the almighty and omnipotent one. His laws have behind them his power and government. When man stands in terms of God's law word, he stands within the power and government of the Almighty. When man trusts in the omnipotence of his word, he commits suicide. But this trust in the omnipotence of criticism is basic to our culture and to our time. When I speak, I find that the commonest type of question rests on a faith that criticism is the answer. Many of the letters which come to us daily rest on the same faith. Depending on whether they are liberal or conservative, questioners will demand that I criticize colonialism, racism, democracy, the Illuminati, the communists, the fascists, the military-industrial complex, and so on and on. Again, I will be asked to pass judgment on this or that sentence that one of my associates has written. The, quote, test, end quote, is not faithful Christian action, but criticism. This demand, however, is an invitation to impotence, to sit on the sidelines as a perpetual judge. I recall as a university student the tremendous pride of the Trotskyites. They were the critics of Stalin, of fascism, of capitalism, and of everything else. This made them, in their own eyes, the purest of the pure, because they were the super critics. All too many liberal, conservative, Christian and non-Christian persons and groups today, that is all of us to some degree, are victims of the same sin in us, a faith in the omnipotence and virtue of criticism. God's command to Adam was not to critique the Garden of Eden, but to exercise dominion and to subdue the earth, to dress the garden and to keep it, to care for it. Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 to 28, chapter 2 verse 15. Man fell when he turned from his calling to subject God to criticism. Genesis chapter 3 verses 1 to 6. One immediate consequence of the fall was that Adam then subjected both God and Eve to his criticism. Genesis chapter 3 verse 12, a sure mark of sin. Since the death of Trotsky, the world of the Trotskyites has been a very revealing one. Only in one country, Ceylon, have they had any important role. The Trotskyites began as a purist of the pure, judging everyone else, and, step by step, they so refined their criticism that they were soon criticizing one another. This, of course, is not an unusual course of events. Wherever the Enlightenment doctrine of the omnipotence of criticism takes hold, virtue becomes a matter of judging others and isolating yourself from their corruption. The result is the fragmentation and atomization of every cause. It is the collapse of movements into cannibalism, mutual self-destruction. Our calling in Jesus Christ is not to critical analysis, to a seat of judgment from whence to judge all others, but to serve and obey the Lord in faith. He is the Lord, the only wise judge, and it is His word that must govern us. It is sin in all of us, and we are all prone to it, to sit in judgment. Nothing creates more havoc on the mission field among hard-working and able men than this proneness to pass sentence on one another. Similarly, nothing creates more tensions in churches and other groups than this same fact. In the world of nations, it makes us prone to see law-making as a solution to our problems. But humanistic laws rest in a trust in the omnipotence of criticism, in man's law word, a judgmental, critical word, as the problem-solving word. However, in all of history since man submitted to the critical, quote, problem-solving, end quote, word of the tempter, Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 to 5, man's problems have only increased. There's no omnipotence in criticism, only impotence.